Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Roberto Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the GFCC. The GFCC is a global organization that, including members and fellows, has a presence in more than 30 countries. We're happy to have you here today. We are here for our 5th online conversation, Now, Bridge, and Reboot. The topic for this conversation today is local realities, looking west. We have several colleagues joining us from Europe, all across Europe, and also Deborah Winsmith in the United States. So if you are joining us, we'll be taking questions. Please use the Q&A feature on Zoom. That's how we get questions from the audience. So before we get started, let me explain what this is about, briefly about the session, and now I will introduce our distinguished speakers here today, and then we will go for the conversation. So now, Bridge and Reboot, what is this about? What is this conversation series? I think that everybody around the globe is facing the COVID challenge at this moment. So now it really is about the response. As we go forward and we think about the future, maybe this is really can be an opportunity to reboot economies. This is why we call it Reboot, and not just to get back to the previous state, but to create future economy and future society. And Bridge really is about how we connect those two moments. What are the steps? What are the things that we can do to go from the now to the reboot phase? This is our 5th conversation. As I said, we are having another one next week, so please stay tuned. Same time, next Wednesday, we're having another conversation. So second thing that I want to share with you, this conversation is about local realities. So what we want to do first is to hear from our speakers from all across the globe on what's going on in their countries and cities. What can we learn from those realities? And from there to build during the conversation on lessons that we can take away from those different realities and things that we can do going forward, as I said, to build a more prosperous economy. Let me briefly introduce our distinguished speakers here today, starting with my boss, Deborah Winsmith, the founder and president of the GFCC. Deborah has more than 20 years of experience in the US government. She was the first assistant secretary for technology policy at the Commerce Department in the United States. She sits on the board of several organizations, and she also worked at the White House in science and technology policy. She has been leading the Council on Competitiveness in the United States and the GFCC, and it's a pleasure to work with you, Deborah. We have joining us from Moscow, Alexander Idrisov. Alexander sits on the board of several Russian companies. He is the founder of the Eurasia Competitiveness Institute. He is the founder and CEO of Strategy Partners, a consultancy company in Russia. And he was the leader, the CEO of the first innovation center in Russia during the Soviet times, or really during the transition. So great to have you here, Alexander.
Thank you.
From the Czech Republic, we have Jan Madlek. Jan is the director of the Czech Institute for Applied Economics. He served as Minister of Agriculture and also Minister of Industry and Trade in the Czech Republic. And he had several positions in government, including representing the Czech government, the IMF in Washington, D.C. Jan, great to have you here. From London, we have John McNaughton. John currently is the chair of the Climate Group, and she has been leading several energy-related initiatives over the year. She used to be a public servant in the UK with an outstanding career. She was the Director General for Energy in the United Kingdom, and she also was the Chief of Staff to the Deputy Prime Minister during the Thatcher administration in the United Kingdom. And she then transitioned to private sector when she really spearhead the inception and incorporation of Alstom's clean power initiative and operations in the UK. John, great to have you here with us. And from Greece, we have Simos Anastopoulos. Simos is an engineer by training. He is the president emeritus of the American Hellenic Chamber of Commerce. He was elected as the president of the Greek Council on Competitiveness. And it's great to have you here, Simos, not just because your leadership in the competitive space, but also because your business background. You're CEO of a manufacturing company that actually is present in the health space. So wonderful to have you here. We look forward to hearing from you. And finally, we have Sylvia Schwarzenegger joining us from Sweden. Sylvia is one of the advisors, part of the advisory body on innovation for the Prime Minister of Sweden. She's the chairperson of the Swedish Foundation for International Cooperation in Research and Higher Education. Sylvia previously served as director for Vinnova, the Swedish innovation agency, overseeing global strategy and operations. And she's now a professor and vice president at Lund University. So great to have all of you here today. We'll get started. We'll get started with our conversation. And I think that we learned a few things in previous sessions. We heard a lot about trust and resiliency. When in our previous session, when we talked about Asia, we learned a lot, and we heard our colleagues talking about social norms and the importance of social norms in the Asian context. But as I said, we want to capture a variety of experiences and learn from the things that you are seeing now on the ground in terms of fighting COVID, but also building the future. So it's a pleasure to have all of you here today. To get started, Deborah, I would like you to make initial remarks, and then we'll go for the European tour. You started in Greece, finishing this first round in London. Deborah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roberto. And on behalf of the GFCC, allow me to welcome everyone and our distinguished speakers. It's delightful to see all you and see your faces, and look forward to the days when we can be physically together as well. And I do want to congratulate Roberto for his leadership in the GFCC and launching the conversations. As he said, we're on the fifth one today, and there have been tremendous deep learning and sharing of best practices and experiences. And of course, in real time, our respective nations are both responding, navigating, and transitioning to new places as we deal with the global pandemic of COVID-19 and what some are now beginning to call the virus economy. But let me just make a few comments in the United States. One of the most important lessons that our nation learned was that across all spheres in every dimension, communication is vital, and communication perhaps more than we're normally expecting, but communication that also is clear and transparent. One of the challenges we've had in the United States, and we're seeing this now in terms of where we are with the pandemic and the economy, and I'll mention that, is that unlike other countries, the United States by design since the beginning of our nation has a very strong history and legal construct for states' rights. The roles and responsibilities and actually legal powers of governors in the 50 states of the United States are very much ingrained in law, practice, and custom, and they have a lot of authorities to deal on many, many levels, including the pandemic. So of course, we've had in the United States a very uneven and different set of responses to the initial outbreaks and response and mitigation to COVID-19. We have not had, as many other nations, one national policy that was implemented throughout the nations. But now where we are grappling with very serious, dire unemployment, particularly in the small and medium-sized sectors of our economy. We've also seen trillions of dollars from the federal government that have gone out to both states, but very importantly to small businesses and individuals to ensure financial stability going forward. And there are calls right now for even additional stimulus. We're seeing now in many parts of the country that the phase one stay at home orders, lockdowns, whatever you call them, are being lifted. We're in phase two in many places. Where I live in Virginia, restaurants are now open. People are coming back in some sense to more normalcy. But one of the things that's very important is, and I think we've all learned this, the criticality of what have been deemed to be essential workers, the men and women who have been keeping our telecommunications infrastructure up and running so we can have discussions such as this, ensuring that there is food and of course the tremendous work and sacrifices and dedication of healthcare workers. And we're seeing, you know, tremendous responses from communities and at the very local level and in neighborhoods to this as well. I think one of the most shocking lessons, and it's already being dealt with in the United States, is that as our country and others participated and led in many ways the globalization of production and supply chains, there was a tremendous shock that reverberated through our economy, revealing the dependency of our country on the actual manufacturing and distribution of critical pharmaceuticals, medicines, healthcare supplies, and of course, PPE, and particularly a dependency on China. Just last week, our FDA revealed that there are over 300,000 registrations of companies that have purportedly selling PPE from China that do not exist. These are shell companies that claim to be selling items that do not exist. So I mention this because we're seeing now a very, very fast, rapid change on many fronts, on the regulatory environment, as well as on innovation, as well as on a realignment of our supply chains in the US, and very importantly, with our close allies around the world. On the innovation front, and in this area that, well, one thing I want to mention before innovation is the innovation is permeating everything. Within weeks, we saw, for instance, in one public university alone, over 40,000 learners immediately move online with remote classes. Now we're in a situation, which is very interesting as it unfolds, that some universities, community colleges, liberal arts colleges have said we will reopen physically in the fall. Others are saying it's a hybrid model of education. Others are saying we will continue with remote learning. But what has happened is that the 19th century models of delivering education have been turned upside down. And we will see a both consolidation, but also radical changes in how universities and higher education, as well as K through 12 institutions, deliver education in communities. And again, it's a challenge in the United States because our educational systems, particularly through high school, are run and operated by elected school boards in localities, and they are not run and directed by the federal government. On the innovation front, it's very, very exciting because there is just a massive amount of collaboration, of new partnerships coming out of small entrepreneurial enterprises, but also major corporations who are responding to the implementation of our Defense Production Act. It had not been called into play since World War II, rapidly moved to produce ventilators, other equipment. And in parallel, we're seeing now with universities, national labs, and companies writ large, both domestic and global collaboration with close allies on new vaccines. We optimistically expect in the United States, as clinical phase 2 trials are already underway, and I know other colleagues will talk about this, there's very strong encouragement we may have a COVID-19 safe, secure vaccine by the end of the year. Telemedicine has long been promised and practiced a little bit, but again, I highlight this state laws in the United States for many, many years and continue to have not allowed a practicing of doctors across state lines. Now this has gone out the window, and we have regulatory partnerships that are allowing telehealth and telemedicine. And so we will see a transformation of how doctors and patients engage together. The Cleveland Clinic alone logged in more than 60,000 telemedicine visits in March. And prior to that, there might have been 2,000 a month. So we're seeing also many, many innovations that relate to how we work, how we deliver our thought. Yesterday, I will share more of this later in the Q&A. Council on Competitiveness convened very important meeting. In fact, I believe our organization is the first in America that is issuing a report this week on the post-COVID economy and the actual pillars for that. But we had over 100 leaders from industry, academia, universities, national labs, and labor convene online with 2 American senators, Senator Schumer and Senator Young, who have released the very important Endless Frontiers Act to actually develop and approve very critical policy for our nation. So with that, let me look forward to the conversation with all my colleagues in Europe, and very importantly, how we can continue to work together and advance the promise and potential of the GFCC. And I do have to say, Roberto, looking at my colleague, Joan McNaughton, she was the energy advisor to Prime Minister Tony Blair. So I just wanted to correct that for the record. Thank you all. Look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much. So let's continue the conversation here. As I said, I want to turn to you, Simos, and you are in Athens today. I think that in addition to the current situation, Greece was recovering from a crisis and then was hit by this one. So what are the things that you learned, not just now, but maybe some of the things that you learned from the past that helped you in this situation, especially you in your new position as president of the Greek Council on Competitiveness? Simos, over to you.
Thank you, Roberto. And it's a great pleasure to be here among such an esteemed panel of experts from around the world. Congratulations are due, Deborah is right, to yourself and GFCC for organizing these conversations. It helps a lot to exchange opinions and really learn. I'm also very happy because this time Greece is not the black sheep of Europe, but rather a good example, because the country, I believe, has dealt rather well with the situation. The country, to answer your question also, has a very long experience in dealing with crisis, a very long indeed, because it took us about 10 years to recover from the previous crisis there. But there are some lessons learned, and one of them is that when you face a situation that is difficult, you have to listen to the experts, and you have to take action early on, and somehow you have to gain the confidence and trust of the people inside and outside of the country. And I believe that this time our government, we have a new government since last year, as you might be aware of. Our government this time listened to the experts, and indeed we took very early and swift action. And the most important thing, it was a government with different state of mind, different way of doing things. And apart from listening to the experts, they found a way to communicate to the people the necessity to follow the rules. Greeks are not famous for following the rules, but in this case, they did. The communication was perfect. And of course, we had the very sad example of Italy before that served as a warning bell to the Greek people in order to avoid the worst. And because the people, indeed, the government gained the confidence and the trust of the people, we managed to have some the results that the country has. You know, Greece today has less than 18 or 20 deaths per million, which is an excellent rate at the moment. We definitely have to wait and see what the effect on the economy will be, or what will happen with the second wave of the pandemic. But we are still hopeful, and I believe and I hope that the developments in time will show if the country did really well or not. Now, to get to another aspect or a view in a little different, the way that you put things, Greece needs to take some action today. We not only need to restart our economy. It took us 10 years to get out of the crisis, and Greece was regaining, the lost ground. Our economy was growing, and the development was quite evident. We were hopeful for maybe 2.5 to 3% growth this year. Instead, now we are facing a recession that might be in the area of 8%, which is too much for Greece, a country that also has a very high public debt at the moment. One of the things that we discovered during this crisis is that our economy is heavily dependent, excessively dependent on tourism. So we need today to find a way to increase the importance of other pillars of GDP. We haven't depended on tourism so much. And by that, I don't mean that we have to decrease tourism. We rather have to support tourism to increase more and at the same time, increase the importance of other sectors of the economy, like, for example, industry, which is very low in our country. As an initial statement, I think that this will serve as a base for discussion next. And I again thank you for this invitation to participate.
Thank you so much, Simios, and for not just bringing those ideas, sharing what happened and how you were dealing with that, but highlighting this idea of economic diversification that in some way connects to some of the things that we've been seeing over the sessions that about the importance of manufacturing or reindustrialization, as you mentioned. You've been looking at the economy through several angles over the years, and we've been talking here about between really the relationship between the economy and health, and how do you see those things playing out in the Czech Republic, but also in Europe and the world in general? What have you learned about this crisis?
Good morning, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank GFCC, to Deborah and Roberto for the possibility to participate in this panel, to share experience, to listen to other people, because it's probably more important than ever in those days when everything is moving quickly to unknown waters. I would like to tackle the problem from the two sides. It has health dimension and economic dimension, and we have a very mixed picture, because as concern of health dimension, situation is Czech Republic is so far so good, because we have so far 332 dead people because of COVID-19. If these results would be in United States, there would be 10,172 victims. So it means that at this moment, COVID from health perspective is not a real problem, and basically economy is reopened in last already 4 or 5 weeks. How we have reached it? It's difficult to say at this moment. I'm sure that studies and analysis will be done, but it seems one strong thing was the usage of face masks from very beginning. Czech Republic was a pioneer in this respect, and the government didn't do everything perfectly, but one thing they did very well, and so did TV and other media, that everybody was using the face mask. Top politicians, speakers in TV, and to send the message that it's normal. And probably it was one of the biggest reasons that we have handled this problem from the health dimension, at least so far, because we don't know for sure what will be in the future, in the autumn in particular. But if I'm looking from economic dimension, it's an absolutely different story. There was recently published OECD Outlook for 2020, and and the worst decline in Europe is in UK, France, Italy, Spain, and then fifth is Czech Republic. Despite the fact that from the health perspective, unlike those first 4 countries, we hadn't such consequences. And it seems that this is because we are small open economy, heavily dependent on what's happening in Europe. And if there is not foreign demand, so it has dramatic consequences to the local economy. At this moment, we can see the real challenges in three sectors. The sector number one in the Czech Republic is car industry, and car industry is facing a lot of challenges. I must say it's no surprise, because we knew that even before COVID, that car industry is undergoing through the process of transformation. We may go perhaps to electric cars, maybe not, or hydrogen cars. The uncertainty is high, and there will be a reshuffling in the car industry. But with COVID, it may be much quicker. Second, and this was completely industry, which is also important for Czech economy, is international tourism. For us, it's not the key industry, but it was always a very good bonus to have, so let's say, 6 to 8% from tourism. And nobody expected at all that the tourists will disappear overnight. And it seems that international tourists will return to Prague, but not in weeks, not in months, but probably in years, to the level like was before COVID, and hence will be necessary adjustment. And it has also a lot to do with the aviation, because a lot of those tourists were coming by planes, and this will not be probably easy in the upcoming future. And the third sector, which is also in a deep structural change, is the energy sector. And energy sector, once again, this was before COVID, but in Europe we are undergoing dramatic transformation. There is the idea of the Green Deal, go away from fossil fuels, but in the same time, it's not clear how to do that. If we are looking on our big Western neighbor, we are getting confusing signals, not so much from the speeches, but from real doing. In Germany, for a long time, CO2 reduction was the highest priority. It's not anymore, because at this moment, it seems the highest priority is to close all nuclear power stations, and they are willing even to open new coal power station to burn the coal, what was supposed to be liquidated and finished, only to make sure that nuclear power stations are liquidated. So a Green Deal and how it will look like after COVID is also dramatically important for industrialized country like the Czech Republic. And last comment, and here I would like to hear the opinion of the other speakers. It seems to me that the worst consequence of this crisis is a fear in the souls of many people, because some people believe that COVID is a problem for supply side of economy. I do not believe it. Supply side economy can have the problems, but they are solvable relatively quickly. What is much more difficult is a problem with demand side, and we have signals from the Czech Republic, because the financial data are coming quickly, that the nation which had always high propensity to save, the people are saving and not spending money, because they have suddenly realized that sudden unexpected catastrophe can come, and it's worthwhile to have as much money as possible. And you know, this is not good situation for economy to go forward for spending, for growing demand. So important thing is to decrease the fear of the people from the COVID. Otherwise, we will not have the moving economy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Ian. I think just starting from what you just said, on the one hand, we have a data gap or this delay in terms of understanding what's happening. But the other aspect that you comment here, it's really about the systemic nature of this crisis, how the crisis itself meets some major changes in business structures, technology, and society. and that connects really well with the things that you are doing, Alexander. So you were in Russia. So if you could comment about the situation in Russia, but also how you, you've been deeply involved in business strategy. How do you see those structural transformations playing out in the context of this crisis, and for sure the situation in Russia? Over to you, Alexander.
Thank you, Roberto. From the health point of view, situation in Russia is looks similar like in other countries. We not believe too much to the death rate, the information we've got, but even we will increase this death rate twice or 3 times, it looks better than in other place. Generally, it's managed quite well in Moscow, but we can see huge inequality between regions. Moscow is doing very well, but other regions, if you will look somewhere far away from here, Caucasus or Siberia, you can find a problem with the infrastructure, medical infrastructure, with the qualification of doctors and medical staff and so on. But generally, we have really about 8,000 people every day, which we got new infected. And the death rate is quite small, less than 2%. Generally, it looks quite good. Let's say, I already said it, we increased official statistic twice. It looks much better. We certainly, from the economic point of view, we've got serious challenge because first of all, we have three kind of crises in Russia. Let's say we're always in a crisis. That's the difference from other countries. Always got crisis. Yeah. Well, the Simas only mentions the Greece is not black shape of Europe anymore. We are black shape of the world whole time. Last years, yeah. For this reason, it's much difficult. But anyway, we have 3 kind of crises. First of all, our economy got historically complicated and say disbalanced structure, and mostly based on the energy sector. And today, with the energy sector, with oil price, it's very much related to the oil price. And today we seriously got the effect on economy generally because the oil price is going down, and we do not expect the price will go up. Let's say it will between $30 to $40 on this basis. It's not enough to recover budget. It's just the minimum which will give opportunity to the country to survive, but not to develop anything. For this reason, and third crisis we've got, actually, we are very close to the serious social crisis because the government, from one side, government managed unusually fast everything, all these issues, what we've got with pandemic, if you look for coverage, for example, of business, government not cover everything, all companies which really was affected. They just partly they selected sectors like tourism and some other sectors and focus on these sectors. But it was easy actually to find out companies which was affected by pandemic, just to say, for example, it's a 30% reduction of sales. It would be much better criteria to select companies which need help. From one side, and second side, the biggest mistake I can see is that the government not enough support demand. I believe in that situation, the best tools which country should use to stimulate demand, because just to provide some loan to new debt to the companies is not a solution. You have to make economy run, to support the economy running. That's important. From a strategic point of view, we have quite interesting result. And particular, let's say we have in Russia also like two words, quite modern and very well running companies, and we have also companies like state-owned companies, which is not so effective. But if you look to the better world, better part of the economy, it's very interesting that for example, retail market, online retail market increased about, and delivery service was increased about 200 or 300% in this short period of time. It's fast growing. We've got a lot of companies which use now approach like which called customer direct to customer. For example, some company which is produce vegetables in suburb of Moscow now directly supply to the families, and it works actually. Families like it and like the service. It works very well, and they will never come back. They will never use the retail chain like they did before. And this is very good opportunity for many companies, not just in the food production. And the generally economy, we on a phase when we open last week, actually. Last week we only opened non-food retail stores and other services, but we still use mask. I've got it here, you can see. I got it with me, and I think we will use it to the end of the year. From the point of the technologies, it's boost IT sector very much. For example, I can give you one example. If you are in Moscow, in office, class A office building, and you've got a manager, travel manager got salary about in Moscow about 80,000 rubles and let's say $1,200,000, $1,200. You can easily get lady in Siberia, which is sitting at home with the child, which is a not really rich family, very poor family, which will happy to work for 20,000 rubles for doing the same simple job like a travel manager online, and you don't need this class A office. And if many years ago we discussed with our clients and say, look, for what reason you need this so many people inside of your office and so expensive office? Now it's moved. It's moved to change because people now see this as this opportunity. For example, in our company, 100% of staff we've got online. And last week we just made a short survey. We asked our people who would like to come back to office. What do you think about result? 75% say we don't want to come back. They want to be at home. And productivity is increased. Because what we mentioned before, what we had discussion, always is discussion. If we will we will go out of office, we will lose productivity. It's not true. Productivity is increased. I have today 8 webinars, 8 conference calls. It's absolutely tough work. Actually, we work more. We work from the 8 morning to 12 o'clock, 12 hours per day now, because you don't have break. It just looks we are closed at home, but actually we are more accessible. People knock into the door every 5 minutes. You've got telephone calls or one on Zoom or someone on Skype or someone on other channels, and it becomes more active. It's interesting also, okay, one good news, because my company is a member of the group of Sberbank. One good news, Sberbank becomes the best bank of the world from the point of view of the value creation for shareholders. It is completely commercial bank. I can say you, it's no support at all from the government. Everything what Sberbank is doing just against support of the government, but it is very good news. This year we've got 10 companies which is creating shareholders value, highest shareholders value for the shareholders, and Sberbank was the number 6, and only the bank of the world which is creating it. It's related to sanctions, related to the impossible to get access from the capital. It's actually good results. But again, it's only one side. But from the another side, we certainly
just Alexander, just be mindful of the time. Just want you.
okay.
Yeah, let's try to be quick in this first round.
Yeah, thank you. But from the point of the damage on the economy, we expect that we will return to the normal rate. Let's say for the same situation like we got at the beginning of the year. It's about on February 23rd. 22nd, February 22nd. It will take more than 2 years to come back because small and medium enterprise was very much affected, and government normally not supported that. Our government like to support largest companies. Some mostly is state-owned, but the small and medium businesses are badly affected. Okay.
Thank you so much, Alexander. And I think that you brought one special flavor to the conversation that for sure that's related to Russia. That's this combination of digitalization plus a big country with a wide variety of local realities and the internal opportunities that creates, internal opportunities and challenges. Sylvia, over to you. You've been not just working and being in Sweden, and Sweden, it's a kind of very unique or interesting case around the globe. I think a lot of people are paying attention or trying to figure out what's happening in Sweden. But you've been also working at the European level in terms of foreseeing the future, generating proposals and ideas, and especially in relation to innovation. So we would love to hear from you, Sylvia. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Roberto, and thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be in this sort of transatlantic and pan-European conversation. As you said, Roberto, so this crisis has made me reflect about a lot of things. You know, I've grown up in both in the US and in Europe in many different countries. And I've been in Sweden for about 25 years, and I've been in policymaking and in academia primarily. And so Sweden, as all of you know, a lot of countries are eyeing Sweden with a lot of suspicion right now. We have, as most of you know, we have a much higher mortality rate than the other Nordic countries. Compared on a global or European level, our mortality rates are sort of, you know, on the higher end. They're below the UK, below countries like Belgium, Italy, Spain, but they're definitely higher than a lot of other European countries. As some of the other speakers have said, I think it is still way too early to know which is the right strategy to have. In Sweden, one of the things that I found really interesting about this society is that Sweden has definitely adopted a very science-driven approach, an evidence-based approach. I would call certainly not a populist approach in how to handle the virus. And it has been able to do that because there is a very high level of trust in the Swedish society. So when the government says to us, we advise you not to go out, then people actually do that. You know, they don't need a decree. Of course, this trust will depend a lot on how the crisis plays out, both health-wise and economically. But this is one of the things I've found interesting looking at Sweden from also an outsider's perspective. Sweden entered this crisis from quite a strong vantage point. You know, our public finances are very good. We have very comprehensive social security systems. You know, we have one of the highest number of unicorns per capita in the world, and a very high level of R&D spending. So I would say a very solid country from a lot of perspectives. And of course, the question now is going to be how this crisis will hit Sweden as a small open economy. As you were mentioning, Jan, Sweden is very much a small open economy. I can also mention that as opposed to many of the other Nordic or European countries, you know, we didn't really close our borders. We haven't closed our borders during the crisis to the same extent. And interestingly, and again, it'll be interesting to look at this in retrospect, you know, we still do not, the government still does not advise face masks. I also look at what's happening to us in Sweden, but also in Europe right now from the perspective of my research, which is a lot about transformation and innovation and how societies handle crises and how societies manage change. And one of the things I would say is that as Jan was mentioning, is I think what's happening now has actually not, there's a lot of tension and a lot of problems that we were dealing with globally and in Europe before the crisis. And these have to do with increasing geopolitical tensions and instability, climate change, increasing social inequality and unrest. And I think that the crisis has just accentuated and accelerated a lot of these tensions and problems. As other people mentioned, I think also some of the previous speakers, if you look at the young people today, for example, in Germany, more than 50% of the Germans before the corona pandemic were skeptical of capitalism in its current form. There's this underlying feeling, I think, in a lot of populations right now, that if we want to emerge from this crisis and the coming crises, because I think this is just going to be the first of many crises, then we need a different society. We need a more resilient and more innovative society. And so when I'm advising the European Commission, I'm part of this expert group on innovation policy for the new Green Deal. We just presented our recommendations to the European Commission. Our slogan has been, protect, prepare, and transform. And I think that sums up a lot of what you others have said, which is that we need to use this crisis. First, we need to protect our citizens and ourselves right now, and our values and our countries. But then we need to sort of prepare for this crisis and the coming crises, and then use the crisis as a momentum for transformation. And I think the kind of transformations that Deborah also mentioned, I see 3 of them actually, having worked in both government and academia. One is that I think we're going to need fundamentally new business models that are able to account for environmental and social sustainability. We're going to need totally new learning and education models, and this is a huge challenge for academia, as you mentioned, Deborah. And we're also going to need different governance models. I've worked in government, and one of the things that struck me is the fact that policymaking is incredibly siloed, as is academia. And it's really hard for policymakers to actually make sense of complexity, and also in this crisis to be able to understand, should we listen to an epidemiologist, or should we listen to an economist, or should we listen to a sociologist? And I think that translational capacity is really lacking. And academia has not done a good job at providing relevant advice, because people are advising from their own disciplinary perspective. So what I think we need to do, and this is, I'm going to finish here. There's a lot of stuff I'd like to talk about, but looking at Europe, just one thing about Sweden, one thing that I thought was interesting is that we have more international students applying to us and wanting to come and already having paid their fees now than we ever had. So I think that's a really interesting, we're seeing a shift. And I think the Anglo-Saxon university model is extremely challenged right now. And this is also a potential, so finishing, my thoughts are that Europe, with its overall quite stable social security systems, its publicly funded research universities that provide tuition-free education, and also its model as, by definition, a construct that is about engaging internationally, not about isolating. I think these are things that could become Europe's strengths, but we obviously have very big challenges in whether we're able to to capitalize on these strengths. But these are sort of some of the things that are going through my mind right now from the Swedish vantage point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. So a systemic crisis that requires systemic solutions, and you highlighted how hard it's to get to that. But also you talked transformation and the work that you've been doing in the European Union, right? And John, you've been working on transformation, driving energy transformation. So maybe this is a good cue for you to share not just your perspective on what's happening in the UK, but going forward. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Roberto and Deborah, for the leadership of the GFCC and for putting these conversations together. I've learned a lot already from the other speakers, and I guess that's true of all the participants. Just a quick word about the UK. We have not done well. Everyone knows we have not done well in the crisis, whether it's mortality or incidence of cases. And if you compare us to France or Germany, we're probably about twice as, have twice as many issues there. And while I agree about the time for lessons, really evidence-based lessons to be learned is not yet, there are one or two things which I think do stand out. I think we were slow on testing and tracing compared particularly to Germany, which has done very, very well. And our messages have been somewhat confused from the government. And frankly, while I think they will claim to be evidence-based, I think one of the problems is that policymakers arbitrage. They choose the science that supports the position and the decision they want to take. So I think that has been an issue. I think there's been an issue over capacity. The bandwidth of our government is not what it should be. 25% cuts in the civil service over the period of austerity over the last decade. And I would say the workload has doubled because everything has to be reviewed because of that dreaded Brexit. That was before COVID. Having said that, there have been some magnificent responses. Deborah mentioned key workers. I think our health service ramped up from a depressed base because of austerity very, very well. They called for volunteers to support the health service. They wanted 50,000, they got 750,000. So, the community spirit is strong, but trust in government has taken a big hit. And what's happening on the economy is not going to restore that confidence. So several of my colleagues have talked about fear and bringing demand back, and that lack of confidence, I think, is going to be quite a constraining issue. And I'll come back to that in a minute. A couple of the things that have been got right are what we call our furlough scheme. 9 million people are having their salaries supported to the extent of 80% by government support. Now, of course, there's going to be a big issue. What happens is that is tapered off from the end of July onwards. But for the time being, it has prevented some of the worst impacts of the crisis. And of course, it is particularly the young and people in less secure jobs and less highly qualified jobs who've been most vulnerable, including in things like the retail sector. But Jan mentioned the OECD study. We are the worst, we're forecast to be the worst economically for this year. And we will have to see what we can do on that. The added uncertainty of untying from our biggest market, our closest friends. Sorry, America, we do have a special relationship with you, but I think Europe is our closest ally now in many, many respects, although we still want to have a relationship, a very strong relationship with the US. That's going to compound matters. I recognise everything that's been said about some of the changes that have occurred. I won't repeat them on digitalisation and working from home, but I do think innovation can help there, and innovation just from liberating people's creativity. So the Climate Group, which I chair, has an annual event, its flagship event in New York every September in partnership with the UN, and it showcases action and commitments on climate change with business and policy leaders. Early on, we took the decision to go digital. We're going to have a bigger outreach, and we've already got more prestigious speakers than we normally have secured because it's easier to get them in this kind of format. But I do think that some of the comments which have been made about travel and commuting and business travel, it's, some of those effects are here for the long term. Of course, there's a change in mood. I hope that will translate into transformation in the areas of social and health inequality in particular. But my own passion for the last couple of decades has been working on climate change. And I think we need to look very carefully at the announcements of the stimulus and where we can actually help to steer governments to get this right. no two crises are the same, the lessons aren't identical. But after the global financial crisis, there was a huge amount of money put in to stimulate the economy. And by the way, the impact of that was a fraction of what we're facing now, as we all understand. And so what can we learn from that about the potential value of stimulus measures? Which of them can operate quickly, have a high economic multiplier effect, and help us to make progress on the low carbon transition. And actually, the evidence shows that there are some very obvious wins. Some of them have, really positive effects to offer across a range of things, as well as co-benefits on health and social equality. Something like renewables, energy efficiency and retrofits, they can deliver jobs quickly, as can work on natural capital like afforestation. Renewables are particularly interesting because in the short term, they have a higher economic multiplier because they're very labor intensive, much higher than other energy sectors. But in the long term, they become very efficient and they don't need labor. So at the point when the economy is recovering to capacity, you free up that labor for the other things it might be needed for. And because of that efficiency, because of savings on fuel costs, renewables offer a higher long-run multiplier as well. So there is a wealth of information around this sort of thing, around clean infrastructure, about energy and training and R&D and some of the innovation issues, which no doubt Sylvia is extremely knowledgeable about. But I think in the developed world, those solutions can help to recreate demand in the economy. And in the low and medium income countries, other issues around rural electrification and ecosystems can be extremely important and have, very, very positive benefits. So the message needs to be, it's not jobs and prosperity to recover from the crisis on the one hand, versus, making progress on the low carbon transition on the other. Some of these measures do both. And we need, I think, in this kind of forum and with the leadership of people like the GFCC to get this message out. And I hope that we can give some thought to how we can get this message across to some of those countries where it's perhaps not at the top of the agenda just yet.
Thank you so much, John, and for mentioning the GFCC, but highlighting the importance of having clear messages, not just to engage at this moment, but to build the future, right? To drive change, as you mentioned. So thanks for raising that. Please ask your questions, use the Q&A feature. We have our speakers here and we will engage them in replying and addressing the questions that you are asking. We have one coming from Mike Nelson. Mike, thanks for sharing that. One of our speakers here, Alexander, was actually talking about digital connectivity. I think he was disconnected there, but I hope Alexander will join us or rejoin us shortly. I do have one or two things that I want to raise to all of you, but Deborah, maybe I could turn to you just to have your reflections on what we just heard here from our speakers. And Alexander, thanks for rejoining. We were talking about digital connectivity and mentioning you.
I heard everything, just I've got a little bit problem with my connection here because my battery was over and I just recharged it.
Thank you. Deborah, over to you.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for their tremendous perspectives and contributions. And I think we all added a lot of complementarity, but different perspectives. And, one thing I did want to add that I think is very important, just in terms of the social and human implications of our societies coming out and living through this COVID pandemic, is, in the United States, we've had about 119,000 deaths. Over 2/3 of those deaths are among the elderly, 65 years old, and particularly those that have underlying conditions. And a very shocking, scandalous fact in the United States is 1/3 of all deaths were the elderly in nursing homes, care homes. And I think that there is a tremendous realization in the United States that how we have treated our elderly, how we have done this both as families and a society has to have radical change. The stories are absolutely heartbreaking. And, had the United States, and this was a knowledge issue because as we know, our understanding of this virus scientifically has changed and continues to change. Many experts, it also is relates to thrombosis and other things besides respiration. Had we known earlier that the elderly were the most vulnerable, I think measures would have happened very, very different. So that's one thing I did want to share because moving forward, as we reopen the economy, we have to continue to protect and secure the elderly. And Germany did a very good job actually on this. But at the same time, we can't have a situation where young people, lives are on hold. They can't go back to university. I mean, many parents are saying, well, we're not going to send our child back to school if they're just going to be sitting in a room on a computer. But coupled to that are the other social equity issues in the United States. I think the world's all aware of the tragic killing we had of an African-American, George Floyd, and the unleash of tremendous anxiety and concern throughout all levels of our society. And there clearly is, and I'm very proud because at the Council on Competitiveness, inclusive prosperity has always been at the heart of our mission. I do think we will see very much systemic change on the social front in our country. And very importantly, taking steps, not just talking, but very concrete steps to ensure that access to opportunity and outcomes is really at the height of the agendas of business, government, communities, and things. And just to give you one example on the university front, we certainly in the United States are very proud that we have students from all over the world that come and are educated in our great universities. But we need to do a much better job of ensuring that women, minorities, and particularly African Americans are educated in our universities. And our universities are going to have to do some things that are very significant to make that happen. They're going to have to perhaps dip into multi-billion-dollar endowments and other things. And we're going to have to also see radical reform in our teachers union that has in many ways, some would say, others would not, but I throw this out as an issue. Why do we have billions and billions and billions of dollars that get spent in our poorest communities and inner city schools and generation after generation of no outcomes? It's not an issue related to money. So I wanted to share those, that the COVID crisis, yes, as it's impacted our economies, and we do have to focus very, as Jan and others said, on the demand. If people do not return to restaurants and do not return into the public domain, as it were, we will see, a whole different type of economic devastation. And having very high stock market gains, which we're having in the United States, does not necessarily translate to how, the majority of people are living going forward. So demand is actually critical, but we're also now seeing innovation in society and a recognition that there are many things we need to address that are core to our values as a society. And so those two things are very related in the United States right now, and others alluded to them, but I wanted to speak more directly about that issue in the United States.
Thank you, Deborah. Building on what you said, maybe we could go for a quick round here and addressing this issue of rebuilding demand, but also rebuilding confidence, and how we can have people and societies, consumers, citizens looking to the future with, let's say, in a more optimistic way. Sylvia, maybe I could turn to you. You mentioned a high level of trust you have in the Swedish society, and that was a recurring topic throughout this series of conversations that we had. How do you see this issue of rebuilding demand and confidence in society going forward?
Thanks a lot, Roberto. And it's been really interesting to listen to the input also from the other panelists. I think we're facing I think one of the things I hear from all of us coming is that what this crisis has shown us is that some things need to change fundamentally. And actually we here have an opportunity to change them. It's everything from, like Joan said, that there are new business opportunities in sustainable, in clean energy ideas or whatever. So, and that we need to change our education system and we need to change our governance systems. One of the things that I think is that you can't just have this crisis hit and then think it's, now we can drive change. I mean, you actually have to prepare change. And I think, so for example, trust is one of the things that I think Sweden has traditionally had, which has facilitated change, and that's been shown throughout economic history. And it's this idea, for example, now when we are in this crisis, that there's a very good level of collaboration, for example, between the Swedish universities and industry. And that's been historically for the last 100 years a very strong driver of innovation in Sweden. And so now when the crisis hits, I can call the CEO of the large companies in Sweden and ask them, what can the universities do to prepare not only your employees who are now furloughed, but actually to help you perhaps use our world-leading research facilities to prepare the next, industrial transition. So I think one of the things I've learned is that you have to build these sort of, you have to have a certain level of trust to be able to interact across the sectors. That is going to be extremely necessary right now. And then, as I think Deborah mentioned initially, also communication. How do you communicate things? I think one of the things that the Swedish government has done quite well, and that's why it's been able to maintain sort of a certain level of trust, is that it has communicated extremely openly and extremely consistently what it's doing. And so while nobody knows if we have the right answer or the approach to the crisis, people don't doubt sort of, the way they make decisions in this situation. I think my sort of take on this, and this is something I've looked at a lot also, is that I think we right now in academia and also in a lot of public sector, we're lacking the organizational agility to actually take on these complex issues. Industry has been a lot better in a lot of ways, because they're obviously for many reasons, but there's been sort of, especially in many, I would say in Europe, and also I will only speak to Europe here, but there's sort of a lack of an organizational agility where we have we have agencies for different specific problems, but when you realize that problems are connected, we find it hard to sort of put them together in a useful way. I just want to also say that I think that as Joan was saying, I mean, one of the things that concerns me is that if we're going to achieve this kind of transformation that we need to achieve right now, also, for example, on the climate front, but also to, in this increasingly sort of unstable geopolitical world, I mean, I think we're going to have to collaborate a lot more internationally around specific issues. And I'm worried right now that and for example, very concretely, we are extremely concerned about not being able to collaborate with the UK universities in the same way going forward, which I think is going to hurt not just our relationship, our interaction, our research, but it's going to hurt research globally. And this is obviously as a result of Brexit. So I think my concern is that we're talking right now too much about national responses to everything. And that could be explained by the fact that it was a health crisis to start off with, and health is often in the national domain, also in Europe. But we really need to start talking about, solutions, common solutions, and how we are going to, get there. And I think too little discussion on that is happening right now. And that is actually, I have to say, also driven a lot by these kind of very nation-focused tendencies that we witness, not least among within the US and in China.
Sylvia,
Okay.
I just have to jump in and thank you very much for that. And also ask for your help and support. We do not have any Swedish universities in the University Research Forum of the GFCC. We have, some 40 universities around the world, and they will be convening for their big work they're doing on University 4.0. So we hope that you will facilitate that, because, you know, Sweden is very important on many fronts. And we look forward to having Sweden actively engaged institutionally in the GFCC for all the reasons you've articulated and we all know. So thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. Thank you. And I've been following your work with great interest, as Roberto knows. So thank you.
Great. John, I think that you have comments related to that.
Yes, I do. And I absolutely agree with everything Sylvia's said. And this issue of connecting the universities more effectively to business is, again, one of the things you work on in the GFCC. And I couldn't agree more about the need for a more cross-national boundary learning. But I'd like to also pick up on the trust issue, and when Deborah kicked us off with her commentary about the that fundamental framework for the US of the responsibilities and duties and powers of the states, the individual states. I think one of the ways you can try to increase trust is to get decision-making that can be taken locally, that is best taken locally, to be taken locally. And I think it's one of the things where we in the UK have not done well over the last few months. And I think there is more trust where people are closer to the decision makers. Local decision-making, possibly even below the level of an individual state in the US, tends to have more longevity because people are closer to their communities who are taking those decisions, and it's easier to hold them to account for the outcomes on those issues. Whereas at the national level, it all gets subsumed into what is the biggest national challenge facing people at the time. So I really want to underscore the role of local decision-making, but not at all to disagree with the importance of clarity at the national level and international collaboration.
Thank you, John. So local decision-making, local realities, it's also a recurring topic. Thanks for highlighting that again. Wonderful. Seamus, over to you. I think that we heard about this agility issue. You are really at the intersection of the public debate, business, and also facing this, as you mentioned, coming from past crises, rebuilding connections, rebuilding trust. How do you see those things playing out in, especially when we talk about rebuilding confidence in the economy, Seamus? You are muted, Seamus.
Yes.
Yes.
I hope I'm not muted now. You know, whenever I listen to experts like Sylvia or Joanne talking about the issues in their countries, I realize that there is a significant difference between these countries and mine. In particular, this is the means to support a more social agenda, because the issues, the same issues that they are referring to, exist also in my country. However, there are other priorities in Greece today that we need to look at first. The competitiveness issue in Greece is most important. The country cannot produce sustainable wealth to support the government and the citizens right now. So there are maybe some more pressing issues that we need to address first. And there I see the value of our Council of Competitiveness and the relation to GFCC, for example. I'm also hopeful and optimistic this time because our government, our new government, for the first time has set up a group of international economists under the leadership of the Nobelist, Mr. Pissaridis, to come up with a new growth plan for the country. Because of the COVID, of course, the work of this group has been readjusted to deal with the pandemic situation, but we are very hopeful that they will come up very soon, this is the agenda anyway, with a new strategy for Greece that includes the ownership of the reforms we need to take. Having said that, and in order to give the other people the chance also to express themselves, I believe that there are some international issues that GFCC can extend its leadership role. There was a very important decision, or actually development, coming to the news yesterday about China losing the battle to the European Union about not being recognized as a market economy. And because of this, I think we can, the European Union and other countries, of course, can limit the Chinese expansions right now. But at the same time, it provides us with a leverage, GFCC in particular, to try to find a way to bring the Chinese to the negotiation table under new terms. And I see a new role for the GFCC there. If I can go back to Greece, the development of a plan and the support of GFCC and the government right now to come up with a new agenda, new reforms that are necessary to bring the economy on a better position to accept international investment and promote entrepreneurship are of pressing nature for the country. And this is where we are right now focusing all the energy of the business community and the Council on Competitiveness. Because of dealing so successfully with the COVID situation, I believe that our government has gained trust and confidence, not only on a local level, but also on an international level. And I see this as a starting point for bringing Greece back on the track to being accepted as an investment destination right now.
Perfect. And thanks for highlighting this idea of having a roadmap, different steps that need to be taken over time, Simos. Maybe Alexander, very briefly from you, Alexander, how do you see this thing about rebuilding confidence and creating demand in the future, but also the topic of agility? You've been working both in business and private sector and with governments. How do you see those things playing out together?
First of all, in Russia, the trust is the biggest issue. We do not have trust to government. The President Putin is supported just less than 25% of the population, and actually, even when we have a good news and it's true, no one trusts this true. And in that situation, it's very difficult to manage any serious changes, provide reform and everything. For this reason, on a government level, we expected 2 years, turbulent time, and social instability. And I think this is what we will have faced in Russia next 2 years. And the pandemic just stimulated and just pushed it forward. From the point of view of the business, it's a different point, different view. Most of companies just simply focus on surviving. They have to save the nuclear of the business, protect it. And but some companies already think about how they will live in a new environment, new behavior of the customers, because customers are really changing. They really don't want to consume how they did it before. They behave differently. They want to be more secured. And this is a big issue, but I'm sure it will take not too much time to adopt. For many companies, most of entrepreneurs, I think, now quite innovative. They have a lot of ideas, and it's going well, quite well. From technology point of view, as I mentioned before, the technology is one of the biggest boosts now for the business model changes and innovation. It's really changed these things, how it was done before. Company managed by another way, different way. They created new value for customers, and I think this is not the biggest issue. From the public point of view, this issue, we have a serious problem with government.
Okay. Maybe I could thank you for that and highlighting the difference between public and private sector issues. Maybe I could turn to you, Jan, because you actually raised the thing about confidence. So what are the concrete steps that you see? And maybe we also got a question here, and I'll read all the questions in a minute, but you also got a question specifically about tourism. As you highlighted the importance, how do we rebuild confidence? But if you could also comment that in the context of the tourism,
yes.
touristic sector.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to tackle another issue that was raised by Sylvia to develop it a bit. I think COVID discovered one thing, that in such a situation like COVID is very much necessary multi-criterial optimization, what is not usually the case of government decision-making process. And here it is very much visible, because you need the experts. But which one expert is the question? Epidemiologist, virologist, economist, sociologist. And simply by creation the team of the expert, you are creating the answer. And even within the groups of different professions, you can pick up the different people. Like Czech government in one moment had two economic teams, and with the tendency to pick up only what we like. We like from this team A, we don't like B and C, but we like from another team something else. And this is not the best way how to solve the problem. We must admit that we must do, or we should admit that we are doing this difficult optimization, comparing lives and economic well-being. What many people even refuse to discuss this way the problem, because it's politically extremely sensitive. And experience is that some strong presidents in some big countries and even smaller countries like Belarus, they were trying to dismiss epidemiological side of the whole problem. It was not flying either. And we should also admit that even the experts who have political opinion, they can be narrow-minded. And hence it means that to multi-criterial discussion, optimization is very much needed. Otherwise, we are not going through. And basically, government decision-making process is not ready for it. And the first thing is to admit that we have the problem and try to solve it somehow. As concerned of the trust building, it's very difficult. I would say one important thing is to avoid double standards. Double standards is something what is causing a lot of problems. The tendency to double standards is high. We are seeing in the EU as handling some countries are more equal than the others. Then the smaller countries, they have uneasy feelings. We can label even the American crisis as a problem of double standards, because part of American citizens, they have feelings that they have another standard than the others when handled by police. And double standard is something what should be removed if possible, because it's undermining confidence. And as concern of the tourism, I was trying to answer by words, because it's happening. First of all, city of Prague is trying to replace foreign tourists by local tourists, who had tendency not to come to the capital city because it was overcrowded by foreign tourists. But it will definitely not help to replace foreign tourists. Second thing, maybe we can return to 90s. That because there were a lot of tourists as well, but they were coming mainly by buses and cars. Now they were coming in recent years by planes, and the planes will not come back quickly. So perhaps the solution on medium term is to encourage tourists come by cars and buses, and maybe by train as well, to make it more green to Prague and other cities. And confidence building is hard work, long-term work, and no breakthroughs can be done. It is something slowly to redevelop trust of internally and externally. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. What I'll do here is we're running out of time, but I'll briefly read the questions. So please be mindful of those when we go for the final remarks here. So we have a question about a regulatory reform, and it's, are you seeing that type of demand in your countries? Are you seeing governments being asked to reform regulations at this moment? The other question that we got, it's really about the enduring impacts of on borders and freedom. How are you seeing that arising or happening in your countries? Thank you so much, Jim, for asking that. And Jim, we're happy that you will join us speaking next week. Also, we got a question from a colleague from Angola. It's really how the lessons learned or the things that you are seeing in your countries what they would have to say to the economies in the southern part of Africa, if anything, anything that from your experience and the things that you are seeing that could be taken there. We also have a question related to gender and inclusiveness, right? When we think about building the future, including future energy, John, how can we be sure that we're including different segments of society and not just replicating the current standards in terms of gender and inclusiveness? So these are some of the topics that came out in the conversation. We also had a colleague from Argentina mentioning university engagement. I will contact you. We really want to have Argentina engaged in this conversation through coming from the university sector. Maybe Deborah, I could turn to you and then we could have a quick round going and giving the word to each one of our speakers. Deborah.
Thank you, Roberto. Well, I just want to thank all of our wonderfully articulate, distinguished colleagues and panelists for their remarks. Not only have we learned so much about what we're doing in our own countries, but I think we all supported the imperative as we move forward to have smart and trusted international collaboration to deal with issues in our own country, but also how the GFCC and other global organizations can move forward to have a stronger, secure, safe, prosperous world. So that's one thing that I'm very, very pleased about. I also just want to mention, and these will be my final remarks, that the GFCC 2020 Global Innovation Summit will be a remote online digital conference the first week of November. Interestingly, our Australian partners, the Ministries of Health, Industry, Trade, Innovation, Ministry of Science, as well as CSIRO, their major research organization, and the private sector Advisory Committee on Competitiveness, they chose over a year ago, they were very prescient, as the theme for the summit, the competitiveness of healthcare, advanced technology, and society. So we're very, very fortunate that we have that theme for the summit this year. And as we develop our annual GFCC statement of global principles, certainly at the top of the list will be these issues around trust and transparency. And so I want to again thank you all for joining us, for your participation, your leadership, and Roberto, look forward to our next conversation. So turn to my other colleagues for their concluding remarks.
Thank you, Deborah. I have a big challenge for all the speakers here. I'll give you 1 minute for your final remarks, maybe starting with you, John. I know that you need to leave soon.
Thank you, Roberto. I think just to pick up on your point about energy and inclusiveness, energy sector is very poor. I do a lot of work on trying to get it to be more diverse, and particularly at senior levels. Until you have that representation and reflection of gender balance and other, well, I was going to say minority groups, but gender isn't minority, then you're not going to get an inclusive approach. There's several initiatives on that, but frankly, it needs the leaders of those energy companies to step up and drive that, because if the CEO drives it, it happens. The only other point I'd like to make is I think there's been a very general theme about collaboration, and people, I think, probably don't expect a global federation of councils on competitiveness to be really highlighting collaboration. But I think the lesson is that good collaboration actually sustains and enhances and underpins competitiveness. It's not antithetical to competitiveness. And so many of the comments have been around trust and collaboration, and the challenges are so huge that if we don't get the collaboration right, then we're not going to meet some of them. And certainly on a lot of them, we haven't got a lot of time, and the pressures are really building. So I think we really have to take that one away as one of the key messages of today. But thank you again. It's been really so interesting.
Thank you. Leadership matters. Thank you for your leadership, John. Alexander, very quick here. Your final comments. Please be quick.
First of all, we got faced a lot of issues, and we learned a lot during this short period of time. And for Russia, it was from the, let's say, even a difficult time, it was very useful, because it was discover a lot of issues which we mentioned before, we discussed before, but we never face it like we have it in life today. And it's changed mind of people. People start to treat government and the political leaders from another, like more, let's say, more transparent. We have now more transparent words than we've got before. We have more realistic opinion of people about the situation. And I think it's a good basis to start change, but it will take time, minimum 2 years, we expect.
Thank you. It's a time of change. Thanks for highlighting that. Talking about change, and thanks for your mention to the GFCC. Simos, over to you for your final remark.
Thank you, Roberto. I believe I have addressed the issue of needing to reform. Greece has realized that during the financial crisis 10 years ago. What we realize today is that maybe COVID and the pandemic was providing us with an opportunity to take ownership of these reforms and proceed with them. Greece was among the last countries in digital skills, for example, digital progress. However, during the pandemic, and because the government needed to make life easier for the people, today you can do everything online, almost everything online. You don't have to go to meet any kind of public employee or the public administration. And this has, I think, proved that when you need, you can do. Necessity can be a great driver for change. And this, I think, is a message of coming out from the Greek example. Plus, the participation in an organization like GFCC is also an indication that people all over the world realize that we need to collaborate. Other people have dealt with the same problems in the past. They have come up with a solution, and we can, by talking only, we can come up with a better solution for our countries. Thank you again for the chance to be here with you today.
Thank you for making this a better conversation, Simos, not just here, but because of your participation in the GFCC. Sylvia, your final remarks and final thoughts.
Yeah, thanks a lot. No, I think a lot has been said, and I would echo a lot of the points that have been made. I think one of the things I take from this conversation is that we're at this inflection point. I mean, there was a question about regulatory change. I think right now it's actually a big opportunity for regulatory change, because there has been a lot of resistance, and in times of stability, regulatory change is very difficult. But of course, it has to be good regulatory change. So I think we have this opportunity right now to drive transformation, but it requires, as Joan said, it requires leadership, it requires collaboration. And I would also argue it requires education and a fundamental change in education, both in content and in form, because in a way you could argue that it's all our top universities that have educated a lot of the leaders of today, and somehow, you know, we're missing a lot of angles in what we've conveyed to them in terms of a holistic approach to societal development. And so I think it's really up to us whether we're going to go back to coal plants, as Jan mentioned, or whether we're going to go towards a truly global classroom, because there are huge opportunities right now, thanks to these kind of things, of actually creating a global and inclusive classroom, and towards green and inclusive business models. So that's the inflection point that we're at, and I think it's our opportunity, you know, to miss.
It's time to look forward, and we look forward to having Sweden engage in the GFCC, as Deborah said. Sylvia, thanks for joining us. Jan, your final remarks.
I think I have said nearly everything. I also thanks for the possibility of exchange, and I also do hope that it's time to change regulatory framework. But I'm a bit skeptical because many lobbyist groups are now coming with the regulatory changes, not always to the better. So we hope that proper changes will be done on European level in particular, because otherwise we can be worse off and not better off after this crisis. Thank you.
So it's about change, but not just changing for changing, but the direction that we're going to, that we all need to consider. Thanks, Sia. Deborah, any final words?
Thank you. Trust, collaboration, working together, and let's design a new future in our own countries and in the global commons. Thank you very much. And thank you for your leadership, Roberto. And I know that our colleague, Joe McNaughton, has stepped off, which is a shame, because I think we're going to have our group picture now.
It's our tradition. Yeah, we're taking a group picture.
Maybe next time we need to do it in the beginning to make sure we have everyone.
Okay, so please turn your cameras on. You are all on, actually. We're doing this. Yeah, here we go. Oop. Yeah, done. We'll be back here on the 24th. What?
I think we might look fresher at the beginning.
Yes.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah. So for those who are watching, joining us here today, thank you for being here. We'll be back in 1 week. We're talking innovation. I think that as we've seen all throughout the sessions, society and the economy will need more innovation, and innovation itself is changing. So please join us. In a week from now, we're having the president of Japan Science and Technology, one of the leading global investors who has invested in more than 75 countries, our colleague from the US Council, Chad Evans, who will talk about the new National Innovation Commission in the United States, and other colleagues. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. See you next week.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you very much. Thank you, GFCC.
Bye.
Bye.